Good afternoon, everyone. I'm going to say namaste just because it's important to stay relaxed when we experience technical challenges. My name is Ben Stapleton. I'm the executive director here at the U.S. Green Building Council, Los Angeles. Really excited to dive a little deeper into this topic today around green homes. One of the things we'll talk about is what is a green home? What does that mean to you? It probably means different things to different people. And just to really frame this thought leadership series here for a moment, we started this series back in 2019 to really shed light on an important topic. And for when we have these events, we really invite speakers who can speak to hopefully every part of the value chain on an issue, although it's hard to get everyone there sometimes, depending on the issue, where we can really talk about what are some of the opportunities, what are some of the challenges, and overall, what are some of the collective commitments or actions that we can take to make progress on the issue. That's really important for us, that meetings lead to action and events lead to action. So with that, I'm going to cover a little bit of an intro here while we wait for folks to continue to show up, as everyone was dealing with a little bit of a technical challenge. Just a reminder as to who we are as an organization. So we're the U.S. Green Building Council, Los Angeles. We're an independent nonprofit. We are affiliated with the Green Building Council that runs the LEED credential and certification that you may know and love, but we're independent financially, we have an independent board. We're really focused on leveraging the built environment as an entry point to transform Southern California into a more sustainable region for all. And we can't do that without people. It's all about people at the end of the day. We really see ourselves as a platform to help enable members of our community to make more impact in the work that they do, and really help extend that to the greater community here of the Los Angeles region. So a little bit of kind of who we are and what we're focused on. And for us, that really means driving market transformation through impactful action and education. We now have 10 sustainability programs that we're running focused directly on that community engagement and education. And my ask for everyone is just to be engaged. Working together to help create the sustainable future for everyone is something that we all need to be part of. And so become a member, join a committee, be a mentor. Anyone can be a mentor. That means just taking your time to help share someone's journey with them. Support an initiative, build yourself through education or volunteer. And it's just about being engaged, and that's how we can all get there in the future. We really appreciate our members. They're really the core of the work we do. They drive a lot of our programming and our education. We really believe in the value of membership here. If you feel inspired, you can follow the QR code there to join as a member, and we hope you do. And all of our members help lead our committees. So we have committees across a wide variety of topics, as you can see here, ranging from building decarbonization to construction. We have an emerging professionals group, but we launched a Green Homes Committee earlier this year, which I've been very excited to see us get off the ground, and we're looking forward to doing big things with that group. We're really growing our programming involved in connecting with people at their homes where they live. And so we really want to help enable that part of the market to make the progress that we need to see. So if you're interested in getting more engaged, please come out and join our Green Homes Committee. We do have one of our chairs, Azumi, on the call with us today. I'm sure she might just drop her name in the chat and say hello if people want to ask questions or reach out to her. Again, if you feel inspired by any of the work that we're doing, you can help support our small but mighty team. You can donate by texting GREEN to 707070. We try to provide as much program as we can at no cost to help move the market forward. And as part of growing yourself, I encourage you to check out our talent portal on our website. The recording of this event will actually be available there. Almost all of our events and all of our recordings and trainings are available for free on our website and through our YouTube channel. We also have featured employers. We have job postings. You can visit that link to check that out. And some of the education we have coming up later this month, going into next month, Title 24 training. We actually are offering G-Pro training for free through the rest of this year and through all of next year. I'm really excited about this. I've been working for a few years myself to get free training available, and this is great. We're going to have free training across a wide variety of topics, including G-Pro, wildfire education, ESG capacity building for organizations. So please stay tuned and check our website, but our training will be free going forward for the next year and change. And that includes our wildfire defense certificate. So we launched a certificate really here just a month ago. We actually have a certificate for both contractors and landscapers to learn how to reduce wildfire risk at the homes that they serve. We have a pilot class coming up here in November for our contractors certification. If you're interested, maybe Will on my team can help me out by dropping the link here in the chat for folks. But you can register or come out and check it out. We just had one for our wildfire defense certification for landscapers a few weeks ago, and we have a wait list of over 150 people now for the next class. We're really excited about that. And these will be available for free on a quarterly basis going forward. And also encourage you to check out our eco map on our website. You can follow the link here. We have over 1,500 different properties around LA with videos, photos. We have tours. You can learn all about the sustainable buildings here in the greater LA region. If you're interested in adding your own projects to it, there's actually a link on the website. You can just submit your project to be adding to the sheet. I'm going to move through some of these here so we can get to the main content. So here's our agenda today. Even with our technical snafu, I'm only 3 minutes over. That's not so bad. But those are my welcome remarks. Again, this is a really important issue for us. Talk about how we can be greener in the environments that we live in. And this is really an equity issue. And we're going to talk about that a little bit today in our panel on how we can make sure that we create access for everyone to have a healthier, more sustainable environment. And so we're going to have a framing presentation from a speaker I'm really excited to hear about or hear from today. We're going to have a panel with a great group of experts really diving into homes, and this includes manufacturers, architects, interior designers, contractors, everyone who's really part of the experience. We're going to have a little bit of time for Q&A after that panel, and then we're going to go into some breakouts where you'll be able to ask some more detailed questions around some of the topics you see here. So construction design, site landscaping, water, efficiency and electrification, home values, and incentives. So all that will be available there in our breakouts, and then we'll close at about 5:45 and get you out into the rest of your evening. I want to thank our sponsors for today, so Southern California Edison and LADWP for helping to make events like these possible. We couldn't do a lot of the work we do without their support. And with that, I'm going to turn things over here to Lloyd Alter. He's an editor, a writer, an adjunct professor at the Ryerson School of Interior Design. It's been a pleasure to get to know Lloyd a little bit over the last few weeks. I'm really excited to hear from him on this topic. And with that, Lloyd, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Okay. Can you hear me?
We can hear you.
Okay.
When I sharing my screen so you can share yours.
Okay, you stopped sharing yours. Good. And do you see the right screen?
We do.
Looks good. Okay. Yeah. So hi, it's a pleasure to be here. As I mentioned, I just published a book last year on living a low carbon lifestyle and learned a lot while doing that went into this presentation. Now, right now, as we speak, tanks are rolling through the streets of Ukraine. And this has caused big problems all over Europe where people are doing energy conservation, turning out the lights. Spain is putting limits on air conditioning. Germany is turning limits on public buildings. Emmanuel Macron is telling everyone to wear turtlenecks. I put one on in his honor tonight for this. But we've seen this movie before. This is something we've all been through. We saw tanks in 1973 rolling through Sinai during the Yom Kippur War. The reaction to that, to the Israeli victory in that war, was OPEC getting together and bringing in the Arab oil embargo, cutting off gasoline oil to countries that supported Israel. And it was a huge political problem. OPEC oil gets into everything. U.S. government failure to dependence on foreign oil was a huge problem. And just like Macron today, Jimmy Carter told us to put on a sweater and turn down the thermostat. And the thing is that as Fatih Birol, the head of the International Energy Agency, writes now, this actually was the start of something. The oil shocks of the 70s resulted in major progress in energy efficiency, nuclear power, solar, and wind. And today's crisis can have a similar impact and speed up the shift to a cleaner, more secure energy future. And there was all kinds of wild stuff happening in the 70s, solar houses, but also up north in Canada, there were people playing with super insulated buildings because there wasn't enough sun. And a certain Dr. Wolfgang Feist noticed this in some American work on super insulation and started developing the passive house. This was the first, built in the 90s. And most of you, I'm sure, are familiar with passive house, lots of insulation, triple glazed windows, thermal bridges, reduction, very, very airtight, and a ventilation strategy because you got to breathe in such an airtight building. And it was all about energy. But it didn't really catch on anywhere, particularly in North America, because here energy was cheap. You can see that the price of gas in 1998 wasn't very much different. In fact, it was higher than the price of gas in 2018. So there was never a real incentive to build passive house at the time. And this isn't going to happen again, the gas is that cheap, because even when this crisis is over, all that American gas is now going to be shipped to, still going to be shipped to Europe and to Japan and everywhere. The gas prices aren't likely going to go down fast. And when I was trying to peddle Passive House, the idea of Passive House in my writing, I would talk about comfort and luxury and noise and even bugs and smoke control. But the Passive House people were right all along. It's really about efficiency, and their new pitch is that it's the first renewable energy. Now, the other problem that we've been facing since then is, of course, carbon, which is a different problem than energy and actually has to be dealt with differently. And in 2015, we all came to an agreement setting budgets and schedules and limits. And people see all those graphs with this sort of curves going down, but I like going right into the document. You know, up until 2019, we put 2390 gigatons of carbon into the air, and this is how much is left that we can put in to stay under 1.5 or 1.7 or 2. And it's not much. And every pound of carbon dioxide that we put into the air now goes against these budgets. And that's why, yes, every bit of warming matters and every choice matters, but that I've added the line to their table, upfront or embodied carbon matters. And this used to be called embodied energy, and it was the energy that went into making the stuff that you don't see that ends up in the house. And embodied energy made sense as a term. But then we started worrying about calling it embodied carbon, which makes no sense because it's in the air. It's not embodied in the thing. And I sat around on Twitter with some friends, you know, what should we really call it? And one said we should call it carbon vomit or carbon spit. And, you know, well, that's a bit radical. Let's just think about upfront carbon. And this has, in fact, been an accepted term now. In the UK, you can see the first stages are called upfront carbon here. In Canada, it's got used. And that's all the carbon emitted getting up to building. And we never used to care about it. If you look at this graph from 1996, where we had leaky buildings and our electrical and power supplies were dirty, embodied energy was swamped by operational energy in almost all building types almost immediately. In 2010, John Ossendorf, a professor at MIT, said, well, wait a second, it's not so simple. Low efficiency buildings, yes, really fast. Get more efficient as when buildings get to be really high efficiency, then embodied energy may not be passed for 50 years. A recent British study by a group of architects found that, yes, right now a house might be 70% operating energy, but as we insulate and put in heat pumps and the electrical systems get better, greener, you know, it could be 95% upfront carbon then. So I did my own, forgive my graphics, version of the graph and said, well, look, what happens here, you know, as we get heat pumps and as we get cleaner electricity, if I have clean electricity in a heat pump, it never gets anywhere close to the upfront carbon. Upfront carbon is everything. And I made this pretentious ironclad rule of carbon, which is as our buildings become more efficient and we decarbonize the electricity supply, emissions from upfront or embodied carbon will increasingly dominate and approach 100% of emissions. And this changes everything about how we think about buildings, because what you have to do is actually think about everything that goes into your building. And as this World Green Building group came up with, First you got to think about not building anything. Do we have to do this? Then we have to think about building less. Maybe we have to renovate. And then we have to think about building clever, optimizing material usage, and build efficiently using low carbon construction technologies. And other people have looked at this, like Yamina Saheb, who is one of the contributors to the IPCC, said, no, it's absolutely clear. Energy efficiency is not enough. We have to have renewable materials and renewable energy. And the one that I found that was so important, that my book was about, is we have to have sufficiency. Avoid demand by not doing anything more than we actually need. Now, some people have given up, like this is from Grist, the goal is out of reach. Why won't anyone admit it? And we won't admit it because it's not yet. Even the IPCC in its latest report in the spring said, if we do demand side mitigation, we can reduce our carbon emissions by 70%. And by demand, if you look at the buildings column on this, it means compact cities, rationalization of floor space, less space, good architectural design and planning, and energy efficient building envelopes, and public transport and walking and cycling rather than cars. And climate journalist Amy Westerfeld pointed out they're right. The report made it clear the technologies and policies necessary to address climate change exist, and the only real obstacles are politics and fossil fuel interests. Another writer in Australia, Samuel Alexander, pointed out that efficiency without sufficiency is lost, because as things get more efficient, we just use more of them, resulting in an overall increase in resource. So if this was your American dream in 1960, I want the car, I want the boat, I want the suburban house. The American dream now is exactly the same thing as Ford shows. It's just a bigger house, a bigger boat, and a much, much bigger car with their silly silly pickup trucks. And if this was the house dream of the 50s, this is Elon Musk's dream house of today. Big suburban house with a solar shingle roof, with a Tesla in the garage and a power wall in the wall. But when you think about this in terms of embodied or upfront carbon, we just can't do these things. Saul Griffiths and his Electrify Everything gang just said, we just put solar panels on the roof of everything and electrify everything and we're fine. But we can't. Dreams like this in the stock photos of wind turbines and solar panels and 2 electric cars, again, upfront carbon. We don't have enough to build this. Now, we could build much better using better materials to do all of this. This is work by Chris Magwood, a Canadian who did a study of the emissions of materials, and he produced a guide that I'll give you a link to after, where he looked at where the carbon is. He uses the term material carbon emissions, which are the front end of my upfront carbon emissions, not including going from the factory to the building. And he says, the foundations and the insulation and the cladding are 72% just from those 3 materials. And we can make changes like don't ever use XPS foam until it's reformulated. I don't know if it is in the States yet. Straw bale would be great, but there are things in the middle. The same with cladding. Don't ever use brick, acrylic stucco because it's on the foam. I guess in California, you'd go fiber cement because you don't want to use all the wood. But we can make choices. But it's more important to figure out what we actually design. Back to the World Green Building Council again, we have to consider embodied carbon emissions and reduction strategies upfront. We have to reduce and optimize using low carbon design. We have to apply design approaches that minimize the quantity of material and prioritize materials which are low carbon. Now, here we are talking about single family houses, but we also have to remember that the single family house itself is fundamentally a problem because of the amount of material that goes into it. I love the Vienna model. Here I am in front of Karl Marxhof, built in 1928, but all of Vienna is like this. Small buildings, single stair in the middle, no more than 6 or 7 floors because their building codes let them do it with a single stair. Very nice housing, and that's all there is. Nobody has a single family house in the whole city. This is how people raise families. And we can't forget Jared Walker's the best tweet of the decade to me, that land use and transportation are the same thing described in different languages. If we're going to build this single family houses out into farmland, we're going to get this. And we know that the car is the single biggest source of carbon emissions in in North America, so that we have to design in ways that don't have so many cars. This is my dream, Stockholm in 1928, everybody on bicycles and trams, and housing that is built that you can do everything on bicycles and trams. And we have to change our perception of green building. This building was pitched to me as a green building by William McDonough and Partners, one of the greenest firms alive, supposedly. And it's sitting on 4 levels of concrete parking. And I said to them, well, why are you doing this? How can you call it green with this carbon iceberg under the building? They said, oh, well, the site was parking before and we had to accommodate that plus our own parking. So we couldn't build the building without it. So we have to change the rules to get rid of these kinds of restrictions. I smiled when I saw your agenda that showed a picture of the Bosco Verticale, the vertical forest in Milan, because this is always something I use. I got pitched this Valcuccini kitchen a month ago in a sustainable kitchen. And it's in the Bosco Verticale, which is always used as a model of green building. I just looked at random green building site. What does it have? Bosco Verticale for affordable housing. But when you actually look at the building and think of it in terms of upfront carbon emissions, to hold up every one of those trees, they had to build these giant concrete planters that had huge upfront carbon. It will take 1,000 years for those trees to compensate for the upfront carbon that went into building this building. And the Valcuccini kitchen, they say it's sustainable because it'll last forever. Your grandchildren will be using it, the salesman told me. But it's made of glass and aluminum, 2 of the materials with the highest embodied carbon on the entire scale. So, our whole perception of what is green building has been screwed up by not paying attention to upfront carbon. So I'll end with my addition to Yasmina Saheb's SER framework, that, we have to build with renewable materials, use renewable power, and we do have to electrify everything. We have to measure and minimize our upfront carbon. We have to think about what we're building. Do we have to build it all? Build nothing, build less, or build simple, which were 20 slides I took out of this because I was not going to have time. And then I believe we're back again worrying about energy, and that we have to build really well insulated, perhaps to the Passive House standard as the minimum energy standard. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Lloyd. Really appreciate your perspective and helping to set the table for us to have this discussion. And it's so important to keep in mind how interconnected everything is, and we can all lose sight and we get caught in the images and the models and the flashy things we see, where it's all really coming from. So thank you for centering us a little bit before we enter this discussion. And feel free, if you have questions or comments for Lloyd, to reach out to him in the chat. Really encourage everyone to use the chat during the event. It's a great way to say hi to people or if you have questions, please drop them in there and we'll make sure we get to them here at the end of the panel. So with that, I'd like to bring our panel up to the virtual stage, if that's what we can call it here. I'm going to have our panelists introduce themselves and talk about their role when it comes to green homes. And then we're going to dive into what I hope will be a pretty robust discussion. So with that, Avide, do you want to introduce yourself first?
Thank you, Ben. And thank you, Lloyd, for that fantastic framing of the conversation. That was very engaging. Hi, everyone. I'm Avide. I am Associate Principal and Sustainable Design Leader at VGF Architect. While I've been engaged in sustainable design for some years, recently I have gotten into single family housing and the concept of how to decarbonize single family housing. So I've launched a new project called Zero House, and on a mission essentially to electrify existing single family homes.
Thank you and welcome, Avide. Neil, go next.
Yeah, thanks, Ben, and thanks, Lloyd, for the framing of our conversation today. My name is Neil Collins. I am the co-founder of a company called Latitude, where we are really working hard to explore really a thought concept called regenerative real estate. And this is where we see real estate as really the catalyst where both people and planet can thrive. But it may be a bit contrarian by, instead of saying that this is necessarily a technological problem with energy at the heart of it, we see it more as a cultural phenomenon. And how do we establish a reciprocal relationship between people and their places? And we do that by bringing together a community of real estate professionals that work with single family home buyers and sellers and our different ecosystem partners of aligned businesses, in order to really provide the expertise, the financing, and the know-how to really establish a different kind of culture than the one that's been dominating.
Thank you, Neil. I'm happy to have you here. And I've enjoyed our conversations over the last couple of weeks as well. I feel that too often, we leave the folks who are really doing the transactions and making the market happen out of the conversation. And we need to help educate them and bring them with us about how we're creating value and creating healthier people long-term. Otherwise, we can't move the market. So, Greg, if you could introduce yourself next.
Sure. Thank you so much, Ben. I'm so glad to be here. So my name is Greg Roth, and I'm interior designer for both Carbon Shack and our sister company, Homefront Build. We started off in the market of home remodels in the local Los Angeles vernacular. And along the way, working on a lot of historic homes, we compiled a pretty large collection of reclaimed and salvaged materials, to the point that we realized we could actually start building homes from scratch with those materials, and undertook a case study home, which we've titled Casa Zero, to see how low we could get our carbon footprint with those reclaimed materials. And once we did that, or were underway with that, and saw that we could build a new house with a pretty low carbon footprint, we then realized that the materials which we were reusing and keeping out of landfills were mostly encased inside the walls and the ceilings and floors. So then we thought, well, how can we then bring the idea of sustainability and low carbon footprint into the home visually itself and the finishes? And from there, we developed a line of furniture, tiles, fabrics, and lighting, which are also made from reclaimed materials, sourced locally, created locally as much as possible, and in many cases carry motifs or are based in terms of their design on elements from nature. So a bit of biophilic design that we're bringing into the home as well. So our mission is to bring both the technologies for green and sustainable and low carbon home building and remodels, as well as products and ideas to the marketplace.
Welcome, Greg, and thank you. Then my favorite comment too, we did a tour of one of your homes. Was that last week? It seems like an eon ago, but it was just last week. And someone made the comment that, like, oh, I thought this was a historic home, and it was actually new construction, but it was all reclaimed materials, and that was just that was such a beautiful statement. I thought. Cynthia, if you could introduce yourself next.
Sure, happy to. Cynthia Adams, CEO and co-founder of Pearl Certification. I've also worked as a U.S. Green Building Council lead AP. I've been a green builder, and I've managed energy efficiency and renewable energy programs, all of which informs the company Pearl that I run today. Pearl Certification, we say we make home value visible. What we do is collect information on high-performing features in homes. This would include, obviously, efficiency and solar, but also water efficiency, indoor air quality, and soon we'll be launching an electrification and resilience certification. And really the purpose of our certification is to become a market catalyst for helping drive more of these types of improvements. Meaning, as a homeowner, if I'm making a purchasing decision and I know that by doing the more efficient thing, I'm going to be able to add equity to my house, it becomes a thumb on the scale, if you will, for the homeowner's decision-making process. So all of the good work from the panelists that we've heard so far, Pearl Certification would showcase that in the certification report and appraisal addendum, helping the owners of those properties to have their homes sell and appraised for more.
Awesome. Welcome, Cynthia. Robin?
I hope you can hear me.
Yes, we can hear you. We
Okay.
can't see you, but we can hear you.
Yes. Everyone, please accept my apology. I'm having technical difficulty. I'm in my car now, several devices later. I am, after 22 years, about to embark on a project to do modular building right outside of Austin, Texas. I believe that that is also, if you are doing a single family home or even a multifamily home, that is the wave of the future, because there's very little waste and you can build the efficiencies into the home in the factory. The joke that I recently had is if you had a regular home, a sticks and bricks home, and you tried to drive down the freeway at 50 miles an hour, it would come apart in about 2 blocks. But these homes are highly efficient and they can be designed to withstand hurricanes and other environmental, things that are happening to all of us globally. I really enjoyed Mr. Alter's presentation and certainly agree with him that multifamily housing is the way to go. But we all know that the reality in America is many people do aspire to a single family home. And I think that the modular model is at least one way to build the efficiencies into those spaces before it leaves the factory.
Well, thank you, Robin. And I just learned this myself today. I'm a little embarrassed. I didn't know this beforehand, but 70% of our land here in LA is zoned for single use homes. So it just gives you a sense of how far we'd have to go. And speaking of homes and factories, we have the infamous Steve Glenn here with us, and it's like he's speaking from a factory that makes homes. So Steve, if you could introduce yourself next. You're on mute, Steve. You're on mute. Had to happen to someone.
Great setup from Robin, given what we do. So I'm the CEO and founder of Plant Prefab. We design and manufacture sustainable single and multifamily housing. We work with any architect. We have built over 30 homes that have been LEED Platinum or Gold certified, mostly Platinum, which is way more than almost any other factory. Our predecessor firm, Living Homes, actually designed the first home ever certified LEED Platinum in the history of the program. It's in Santa Monica. I live there. We have 2 factories. We're building our third, but it's our first ground up, fully automated facility. By the way, it'll be fully powered through photovoltaics. And there we'll be manufacturing the first hybrid building system in the US. So it's a combination of new kind of panel we developed, as well as modules that we assemble from those panels. We're very careful about the materials we use, the technologies we use. We're thinking as much as possible about minimizing energy use, water use, material resources, indoor air quality. And we're the only B Corp certified full service prefabricator in the US.
Awesome. Well, welcome, Steve, and welcome to all of our panelists. And Robin, if you are able to get your video on and going, just let us know, and I'll add you to sort of the main floor here. And just to start off, the first question I really wanted to dive into was going to be, how should we approach greening our homes, and what does that even really mean? Because it seems like we have different definitions around that. And Steve, maybe I'll start with you, just because you've been doing this for so long. How should we approach integrating, greening our homes, and what does that mean to you to start?
Well, we developed early on a predecessor firm, Living Homes. We call it Z6 because we were just, what are the main things that we really want to try to minimize and frankly move to the next level, which is improve, so we want to minimize energy use and actually be in a place to put energy back in the grid. So zero energy, zero water. We want to reclaim what we use for irrigation. So every home that we've built is gray water ready. Sadly, not every place lets you do gray water, but we don't care. We put it in the piping so that it's ready to, it's available to use if your local municipality allows it. Zero carbon, zero waste. So thinking carefully about the materials you put in, thinking carefully about how those materials can be recycled. Zero emissions, that's an indoor air quality issue, and then zero ignorance. And Lloyd, by the way, Lloyd, loved your presentation and like to get a copy, please. Lloyd was dead on. You can do lots of things to minimize your ecological footprint, but if the people who live in your home aren't responsible about how you use it, then you're going to have a big ecological footprint. So we think about, we look at those different categories, and we're always trying to figure out how to drive them to as low as possible, or go to the next level and even improve to as much as we can those different categories.
Thank you, Steve. And Cynthia, as someone who sort of has to define what a green home is, right, to be able to communicate that for folks, you know, how do you look at that definition? How do you define what a green home is for you?
For us, we've really focused on the energy use of the house, because while we do certify new construction, the majority of our focus has been in the existing home. So it's about helping homeowners make good choices to make their homes more efficient, and then also good choices when it comes to renewables, battery storage, EV charging, things like that. We also look at water efficiency, because depending upon where in the US you live, that can be more or less of an energy use. And then, as I've mentioned, we are also developing an electrification badge and a resiliency certification. I think that what distinguishes our approach to a certain extent from the other scores and labels that are out there is that there is that, you know, an assumption that it's for new construction. So the embodied energy is important. Is the home close to transportation? Do you locally source your materials? There's a lot of issues and problems that can be solved when you're starting with a clean slate. It could get trickier when you're starting with homes that range from being built in the 1700s to yesterday. So our approach, as I said, just to wind that one up, is really focused mostly on the energy use of the house, because the tie into carbon there is also obviously pretty direct.
Thank you, Cynthia. And Neil, as someone who has to, you know, help communicate the value there to buyers and to sellers and people who work, you know, at your firm, you know, are there certain aspects of homes that you look for, or how do you define what a green home is for you?
Yeah, this is such a great question, and one that we could really sink our teeth into for a really long time. And something that really disrupted my thinking a while back was somebody out of a gentleman named Bill Reed, a pretty acclaimed architect, that pushed my thinking, saying, you know, if we had a solar panel or a living building challenge certified property or passive house, every single home was a passive house building, would we still be in our current crisis or situation that we're in? And the conclusion was that, yeah, likely we would be. And we see this because all issues are interconnected. We have an epidemic of health. We have people sleeping on the streets. We have inflation that's run rampant. We have extreme ecological degradation with marginalized communities. And it's all because of our relationship with this place. And so the interesting thing for us, at the forefront of working with people to find their place in the world and to find a home and to sell their home, is that people come into this conversation for very different reasons. And we need to be able to hold that, because I don't know very many people that are just driven because they're really geeking out on the passive house nature of their design, or it's saving them, saving the college or the environment, this gigatons of carbon. But what they do care about is they care about their health of their family and their savings in their bank account and being able to put food on the table and send their kids to school. And they care about waking up in a healthy home and going off to work and feeling productive and enlivened and spirited by their work. So I think that if we can really start to honor what a green home is and talk about how it is unique places that are nested in unique ecosystems that are connected to people's lives at the intersection of building and materials and finance, and start to realize that we're talking about community and we're talking about resilience. And off of that, we can then start to bring in all these amazing different types of technologies and amazing approaches towards our built environment. But only once we can start to connect true wealth further than just financial wealth, but to see it as health is wealth and health is community and health is resilience, then I think we can really start to push the ball forward on what green homes are and how they can proliferate in our culture.
Wow, that was really beautifully said, Neil. Really beautifully said, and for me, this is why I'm driven to do this work, is because buildings do sort of touch everything, and it all is connected and comes home in a building somewhere. And you just hit that so beautifully. I think we spend too much time sometimes celebrating these individual projects and not really working to meet people where they're at and with what's important to them. And the reality is, we're human beings and things haven't changed, right, for thousands and thousands of years in terms of what we're looking for and what we need. And I get frustrated sometimes. We sit in these rooms, we have these big events, and we put one building up on a pedestal, and it's like, wait a minute, what are we doing here? What are we celebrating? I want to shift a little bit, and Avide, I'll probably go to you first on this to start talking a little bit more about what can we do, what should we do in our homes. I know you've been living through some of that experience, updating your home for the Zero House project, and I hope you drop a link here in the chat for folks. But just having been going through this process of retrofitting your home as someone who's passionate and engaged and wants to do it to show what's possible, what have you been doing, and what has that experience been like for you?
Yeah, great question, Ben, and one that I could probably talk about for a long time. As somebody, I have a few advantages compared to a homeowner, right? I am an architect. I do have the technical expertise in terms of sustainable design and what needs to happen. And I can navigate around some of the nuances or bureaucracies around getting the right systems for your house, for example. And that's a big challenge to typical homeowners, I think, is just understanding where to start even and what's the right thing to do. And everyone's trying to sell you something, so everyone's going to have what they want to sell you. They say that's the right thing to do. And I think, as Colin, you put it beautifully. It's about community. It's about meeting people where they're at. And there's so many different definitions of green home. It really depends on how you define it for yourself. And I find it useful to have a personal connection to what green home means to you. And it could be different for different homes, for different people. But the message that I do give out to folks who are interested in greening their homes is three-step process. Number one, make sure your home is as efficient as possible. That's kind of the baseline for me. You can't really go anywhere beyond that if you haven't made your home as efficient as possible. Both in terms of the systems and the energy it's using and how much insulation the house has, you got to make sure that that's all the latest and greatest. And then second, I'm a huge advocate for zero emissions and decarbonization. So second step is to electrify your house and remove gas appliances, which actually turned out to be a little bit easier than I thought with my house. But there are still some big challenges. And I can delve into that later as well. And then third is supplement your home with solar panels, but that should absolutely be the very last thing that you're doing in terms of getting to net zero energy or even zero emissions. A lot of people make the mistake of just putting some solar panels on their home because that's the easy thing to do. Well, if your house is a big energy hog, you're not going to be very happy about the money you spent on those solar panels because it's not going to make that big of a difference. So all important things to keep in mind to make your home more efficient. And And then the last point, Ben, is water usage. You know, gray water systems are allowed in California, in so many cities in California. You could, every house right now out there, every single family home out there right now could do a simple laundry to irrigation system to reuse the laundry water for irrigation. And you don't even, most cities, you don't even need a permit for this. So there are things like that, low hanging fruit that folks can start doing.
Thank you, Avide. And yeah, I'm glad you hit on some of those points. And, you know, unfortunately, I do see it in the future for us here where we're going to have some mandated water reuse here in LA. I think that legislation is starting to brew. And, you know, I wish I could say our drought situation is going to clear up, but it's not, and it's only going to get worse here. And you hit on a lot of great points. Greg, as someone who builds homes and does this, are there things that come to mind for you that people can do or think about in their own homes that could be some of that low-hanging fruit, or from a construction perspective, what comes to mind for you?
Well, I think that there are, you know, a myriad factors at play. I think, you know, when we undertook our showcase, our case study home with Casa Zero, we looked at every aspect from start to finish to see how low we could get our numbers in terms of carbon footprint. And we had the luxury of doing that because we were doing it ourselves as a case study. That's not necessarily what every homeowner can do. And from our perspective, we are not advocating an orthodoxy necessarily, because I don't think as a business model that that's practical. But we do feel that whatever you are able, willing, and interested in undertaking in terms of a home, either new build or remodel, that goes towards lowering your carbon footprint and creating a more sustainable home, we're all for it. Now, we have plenty of clients who come to us without any mention of green systems or sustainability. And we're, as a matter of course, wherever we can, implementing, you know, added insulation or dual glazed fenestration and those sorts of moves that add to a lower carbon footprint. But I do think that it's important to educate. I think that legislation and incentivization are key factors that you know, are sort of in a sense outside of our purview, but certainly we have an interest in them. And so I think that, like I said, there are a lot of factors that go into it, and the more people know, the more information they have, the more they're able to make those decisions.
Thank you, Greg. Thank you. And you know, Robin, you know, thinking about some of our previous conversations just around, you know, interior design and healthy products and healthy environments, and you know, approaching the process of someone who makes stuff, right, and designs stuff. Yeah. How do you communicate and engage consumers around greening their home, right, and entering that conversation? Because I imagine that must be a hurdle you kind of have to get over.
I think any designer, and first of all, hi everybody. So sorry, the technical difficulty tonight has just been insane. But the first thing I would say is I try to tell people, if they're going to furnish their homes, they should first check out brown furniture. Brown furniture, meaning your grandmother's furniture, the antique or vintage store. And if you need to repurpose the legs or any other part of that furniture, it's likely already off-gassed. And so few people want brown furniture that, and I think I shared this with you, Ben, that I was able to get a 10-foot long by 9-foot tall brown bookcase for $300. And I just had to repaint it, restain it myself, you know, take some of the scuffs out. But had I gone to, I'll call it the big box blue store with yellow writing, that 10-foot long bookcase would have cost close to $1,000. So I want to urge everyone to start thinking about not just the building envelope itself, but what are you putting in your home? As we all know, the cheaper furniture often has formaldehyde-based glues, which then can impact your indoor air quality. When you think about the stains that you're using, certainly water-based is better, but sometimes oil-based is what people are using. Just think about what you're doing with your furniture too. A lot of the knowledge base doesn't think about the fact that there are 2 rooms in your house where temperatures change throughout the day, your bathroom and your kitchen. And so if you're using something with formaldehyde-based glues, a known carcinogen, you're going to have some issues. And if you're also not thinking about the insulation in the walls and you're just putting any kind of insulation in the walls, what does that do for you? There's certainly wool, there's reclaimed blue jeans and all sorts of other energy efficient insulation that does not either off gas or create other health issues for even the installer.
Well, you brought so many things to mind, Robin. I just, one of the things that always strikes me is just how little it seems kind of like our process to go about building homes and designing homes has changed, in I don't know what the right amount of years is, if it's 50 or 100, or maybe it's scary, it's 150. I don't know. Steve, just given some of the work you're doing, like, how do you think construction has changed and has to, for our products and for our homes? What are your thoughts? What are your thoughts there?
Well, first of all, big picture, the construction process hasn't changed a whole lot, and I mean, really since electricity was developed, and you've got, you've got nail guns, but other than that, it hasn't really changed much. And sadly, material innovation's been pretty slow too. For some good reasons, obviously, fire and safety, health. You want to make sure that materials are structurally sound if they're structural, et cetera. But nonetheless, I think there's just a variety of factors that make it difficult to innovate. Obviously, we're focused on offsite construction. That's a big change that's happening in the US for categories other than mobile homes. So mobile homes, well, prefab's been in the US since Sears Roebuck, which started as a kit home manufacturer 100 years ago. So prefab's been here a while, but in the US, it's really been limited more to lower cost housing, right? Mobile homes, most people think of. But in Scandinavia, in Japan, in many European countries, prefab is used to really efficiently address many different housing segments. And the reason why those countries have had to innovate much quicker than us is that historically, cost there for land, labor, materials has been much higher than ours. But what happened during the downturn of 2008 through 2012, there was an unprecedented increase in land, labor, material costs, even permit fees. And oh, by the way, a lot of labor left the market, construction labor left the market during that downturn and hasn't come back. So, and perhaps, frankly, somewhat, I think, coincidentally, but not totally, the venture community, the investment community has kind of woken up to the trillion-dollar opportunity here. And so I'm sharing all this to say there are now a number of companies, like to think we're among them, who are really trying to innovate, both in terms of how we manufacture from a time cost perspective, from a sustainability cost perspective, but also lots of construction tech companies that are looking at new materials, that are looking at tools, software, and otherwise to help the manufacturing, the design and manufacturing, the construction process. So I think we're going to see some big changes moving forward, and this is really exciting.
So it seems to me that we need to figure out how to kind of bring contractors and builders with us really as part of this, because really it's like we have these limited inflection points, right, where we can create change, and whether someone's doing a retrofit or they're building a new home. Greg, just given some of your work, do you have any ideas there? Or what have you seen in terms of engaging, builders and contractors in better ways? Are you seeing any change on your end?
Well, you know, there's a learning curve involved, and whenever there's a learning curve, there are costs. And I think a lot of professionals in this industry sometimes tend to shy away from added costs. So I think that that is a challenge and a hurdle. And I think, again, that the more that we can sort of standardize and be comfortable with these new additional technologies, the more we're going to see them implemented. So I think in terms of contractors, it's really a question of familiarity with the options that are out there and better understanding how they're used, and not just in terms of putting them into the building. You know, there is a learning curve there too, but also the cost benefits of doing that in the short and long term. So I do think that there's some education that needs to happen on that front.
Can I interrupt real quick as well?
Yeah, go
I
ahead.
agree with you. I agree with you 100%, but also there's the building department officials. We
Yeah.
can't just put it on the contractors, because they may be educated by us, and then all of a sudden the building department's like, you can't do that. Or like a passive solar, like a Solitube device. Maybe the building department manager is like, oh, I don't like those, they leak, I'm not going to allow that. And so we have to start working, I think, with building department and inspection officials to make sure that when the contractor does follow our design innovation, they're not stymied in the inspection process.
Yeah, and that it doesn't change from day to day, right? Someone says it's okay, you get a different inspector out there a different day, and you know, there really needs to be some incentives for innovation that is environmentally friendly, right? That's helping the environment, especially on from a building safety perspective. You know, I want to hit on something that everyone's kind of touched on in some ways, and I want to get back to this question of kind of affordability and pricing, and people don't want to pay more. You know, can we have, you know, green homes that are affordable? You know, is that possible? And Neil, maybe I'll start with you, just to know this is an issue that's near and dear to your heart. You know, what are your thoughts there?
I think it's really challenging because it's bifurcated in the market. It's easier to drive green building at the newer end of the market, because appraisers actually have a ton of leverage there. As if you're trying to compare one new green building to a new development that's more conventional, it's easy to show, okay, this is what's different, and this is why this building is going to have a higher value because these went into it. But once you start getting into what's already been built, then it's a whole new equation. And that's where the appraiser's hands are really tied. And from the transactional side of the industry, there's been a lot of talk about green appraisals, but time and time again across the country, our work with Latitude shows that it doesn't matter if you're requiring a green appraiser to come on board, we're still limited in the fact that if someone takes a 1924 bungalow and creates incredible technology in the walls so that you have a really energy efficient home, you've got triple glazed or triple panel with high glazing windows, passive heat exchange, heat recovery, like everything that maybe the consumer may not be able to see. They've invested a ton of money into it and they want to recoup that investment back. Well, an appraiser is not going to have the same mechanism of comparing new building to the vintage, because they're going to be comparing vintage to vintage. And so now all of a sudden, that somebody that does recognize that value that this property has, they are most likely going to have to pay above what the appraisal is coming in at. And they're going to have to come in with a higher amount of cash down in order to do that. So now you have this affordability issue of like, okay, you've got to come in with additional resources in order to find those properties that have really low embodied carbon, and there has been someone before you that's done really well. And then we make those decisions every day as homeowners of, does this improvement make sense? Is it a good financial investment? And sometimes we decide that it is. And then sometimes we decide that it isn't. And we end up making decisions from our pocketbooks of, if you go stand in Home Depot and you watch people trying to pick out flooring, it's not what's the best kind of flooring that's good for the planet and that's good for them. It's, well, this is $3.94 a square foot, and this is $8.57 a square foot. So I'm going to go with this one. So it's really hard. It's a really complex world. And I think once we start to introduce affordability into the equation, and we're talking about building and homes, we've got to realize that we're playing with a stacked deck, that we have no control of some of these variables. Right now, we've gone through a period of extreme appreciation, and we like to call that it's because we have a housing shortage and the demand is really high. That's true. Those are the fundamental underlying supply and demand situations, but we've also had really cheap financing. So what does financing do? If it's cheap, it pushes prices up. And so now what we're seeing is that people are not even talking about affordable homes anymore. They're just talking about attainable homes. Can we get into a home? And that's a pretty big issue whenever, especially coming from California or other coastal states on the East or West Coast, we're just seeing prices outstrip incomes. And this is huge. And so if we're going to start really thinking holistically about affordability, how do we start encouraging people to live in more human scaled homes that are not 3,000 square feet, but can you put a family into 2,000 square feet? Or can you start to share space and share amenities, or think about how your impact is of where you're choosing to live and where you're choosing to work, or where your kids are choosing to go to school, how that really impacts your transportation needs and the spatial needs that comes along with those decisions of how many cars do we have, how much time do we spend on the road. So I find that affordability is one of those like really slippery slopes. Another instance that we've touched on in this panel, that where the deck is kind of stacked against us, where we don't have any control, is zoning. We have largely exclusive zoning that does not allow us to create the kind of housing that we're all kind of dreaming of, that's more oriented towards life than towards cars. And this is a huge issue that we've got some really bright urban planning professionals stuck in very bureaucratic municipal organizations that they're completely burnt out, and they're not really sure how to interpret code. They're not sure how to make change. So before I really like get myself wrapped in a lot of different complexities around this issue, I think that really at the end of the day, affordability, attainability, these are all things that we need to start orienting towards. We need to start thinking about how we're using our space, and the design community can really lead this from how do we build multi-purpose spaces and put, instead of having 800 square feet per person, which is the average now, how do we go back down and reverse the trend closer to about 400 square feet per person that we saw probably at the beginning of the 20th century?
And as you said, we've got, a shifting market here, and as interest rates rise, that's going to cause things to change a little bit. I think one of the things that I'm hopeful is that we'll see a little bit of a flight maybe to quality and a recognition of value in homes that are greener or more resilient, because they're worth more, and if money's more costly, there's going to be a little bit more scrutiny around that value. And these are complex issues, as you said. Cynthia, just going to you for a moment. Again, since you do this certification, do you see us, creating long-term value in homes? Are you seeing that value, happening in the transaction process as people sell homes or appraise homes? Is that being maintained there?
Yes and no. I'll note two things. One is that in the recession that we had before, back starting in 2008, some of the types of residential structures that held their value best and did not depreciate in the same way the rest of the market did were green homes. I think IMT, the Institute of Market Transformation, did some research into that. And then the other thing that I'll note is that in commercial buildings, especially Class A, those buildings that have LEED and Energy Star labels on them consistently rent and appraise and sell for more. And that's been documented in a couple of different studies. In the market that we have today, I appreciate what Neil has been talking about, that you don't have any control over the mortgage company, you don't have any control over the appraiser that shows up, and you may be fighting a battle with them to get them to recognize the value of the additional work that's been done, whether it's on a new construction or an existing home. But I will say that absent a certification, particularly one that includes an appraisal addendum, like the Appraisal Institute's Green and Energy Efficient Addendum, which we fill out just as an independent third party on we do that with every certification. If you're not calling attention to these things, then you can sure as heck bet that the appraiser isn't going to notice them, by and large. You can't help but miss solar panels, but even if you see them, that doesn't mean you have a clue as to how to assign contributory value for them. I think that in the case of solar, it's been a real hot and cold type of situation where you certainly can use tools like our solar equity calculator or another one called PV value to create a discounted cash flow number based on the production of the system, and then actually have a dollar value to give the appraiser for that particular installation. On efficiency, we don't have anything like that yet. We're actually developing an energy efficiency equity calculator. We'll roll out next year. That'll be, again, a discounted cash flow value based upon the energy savings. But I think that until we either have enough comps in the multiple listing service, because we've called attention to these features, the real estate agents have actually included them in whatever greenfields are available to them so that you can find comparables, or until we have an alternative methodology that is approved by the appraisal community and easy to use by the appraisers, you are kind of a little bit stuck with the draw that that you get with the appraiser that shows up to the house. And you can actually contest their appraisal. You get that appraisal back, and that you've given information on high performing features in that home, and they have not included it in the report, and they have not given an opinion on it. Assigning zero value to those types of things, it can get them in trouble too, because they have to be able to back up why all of this additional improvements, things that are above average in terms of efficiency, et cetera, somehow don't factor into the appraisal value. They have to be able to justify that too. So yeah, a lot of moving parts and pieces there, but I think that the more information we can share with the stakeholders in the transaction, the more we backstop our success in being able to get what is deserved for the value of that property. And God bless Izumi, real estate agents play a super important role in this, because if they're not calling attention to these features and they're not documenting them in the MLS, then they basically are invisible. And that becomes a part of the problem.
Thank you. Yeah, it gets overwhelming pretty quickly. We have talked about, planners, we talked about builders, we're talking about everyone in the process really needing to get educated and make pretty substantial shifts. And that can get very overwhelming. And trying to get homes certified, right, and create that value so that we have the comps to point to, so people can look to the past data. That will take some time. Steve, we had talked about this a little bit as a question, but why do you think we don't see more certified green homes? There have been systems in place for a long time. It sounds like Cynthia's is a very robust system that's gaining traction, but why do you think we haven't seen more in the past?
Well, I'm sorry to say I don't actually know about Cynthia's system, so want to learn more about that. We've used LEED a lot, as I kind of alluded to earlier, and we know the gig, we know how to document, but honestly, it takes a lot of work, and it costs money. I mean, it's, we've had, fortunately, a number of homeowners who are like, cool, let's do it. So that's great. But a lot of people, they don't want to spend the money on it. And,
Yeah.
it's not just, I mean, certification itself, actually I haven't looked into it in the last couple of years, but it used to be $8,500 single family home. But there's time getting the documentation together. There's some testing. So I think we used to quote people, and again, I'm not really on the front lines of sales, so this is a little bit dated, but we used to say, count on 15,000 or so extra. And we would present people with UCLA and some others have done good studies that seem to suggest that a LEED certified, really they looked at green certified, but LEED is the leading green building certification program in the US. Green certified homes in California sell for 5% more, maybe it was 10%. I mean, we presented that, but it's not moved most of our clients to do that. Interestingly, more developers see the value. If you kind of work out the math on their projects, it's much less because it's not the same amount of documentation, right, for each one. So, and and it's cheaper to get same unit certified. So we've had a little bit more luck with that.
Wow. Well, yes, there's so many things here. It makes me think just about equity of access, right? Like we're Americans, we want everything at the exact same price. We want to do everything that we wanted to do before, and we want to spend, we want to have more electricity, want to have more functionality, but at no additional cost. And we're just not taking into account all these other factors. I do want to switch to the occupant health and the resilience components of this for a moment. And we talked a lot about, a lot of other factors. We haven't talked about insurance companies really, and, how they should value maybe, these homes in a better way that are greener. We haven't talked about banks and obviously we've seen some green mortgages out there, but not really motivating probably in the way we'd like to see. Maybe Avadi, I'll go to you. Just do you have any comments just around, the occupant health side and the resilience side and how this factors into some of this?
Yeah. I think the number one benefit of green homes is really occupant health and comfort. It's your health and comfort in the home. And it's kind of interesting. I think we have, as a population, gotten used to being in homes and spaces that don't really work for us and don't really function for us. And we've gotten used to that. And that's become the status quo, right? How many homes have you walked into? It's too cold or it's too hot. There's always that one room that heats up and nobody can figure it out. And we just kind of get used to it.
I'm in that room right now, by the way. It's my office.
Right. Yeah. So we get used to it. We think, okay, that's just the way it is. We can't change it. We don't know how to change it. Okay, we live with it. But that's the number one reason why you would do a green home or retrofit your home to be green, is to get better comfort, get better air quality. The reason I'm such a big proponent of all electric, sure, I like to geek out on decarbonization and all that good stuff. But really in a home, I mean, my home, Zero House, is 500 square feet. It's a tiny house with a gas stove in it. That entire home has probably just got tons of emissions from just the gas stove, right? The air quality inside that home is far from good. It's worse than the pollution outside, probably. So that's the reason that I'm such a big proponent for all electric. Is you can have better air quality, you can have a healthier home, and you can have a home that functions for you. That's all doable. And I really do believe that this is all doable at an affordable rate. This is not something that you have to have a whole bunch of money to invest into. You can do it slowly, one by one, make small upgrades. There are energy efficiency loans out there that help with upgrades on single family homes. State of California right now is actually rewarding all electric retrofits for single family homes. There's rebates for that. So there is ways to finance this, and you can have a healthier home.
And you know, we don't have to dive into it here, but you know, there are some good programs coming through the Inflation Reduction Act, specifically around home weatherization and home efficiency, electrification, a lot of the stuff we've talked about. And you know, the solar tax credits, you know, depending on kind of where you are and how you layer them, you know, can almost double and are now in place for, you know, I think it's the next 30 years or whatever they committed to. So that should create a much stronger market for us. Robin, anything you want to add just around occupant health or the resilience component here before I go to my lightning round of questions?
I think all of us are all on the same page. There's so many things that we need to be aware of from multiple, multiple people in multiple fields who have to all get on the same page for building efficiency, for health and security of the homeowners, and more importantly, I would call it the governmental entities that need to start saying it's okay to have solar tubes, it's okay to have passive lighting devices, it's okay to have gray water. However, you mentioned earlier the zoning issue with 70% of American neighborhoods in LA alone are single family zoned. How are you going to change that? Because a lot of people have the NIMBY mindset. Even in my little town, there's 700 homes. And I believe every home except mine made a petition that they did not want to have any multifamily in the town. Because their fear is, I would say, it could be about income, it could be about race. They were like, oh, if we have multifamily, then that's going to attract lower income people, and we don't want that, or transient people in a community. That's an issue. So we've got a global housing issue in the United States, and we need to start looking at ourselves and recognizing that it can't always be in someone else's backyard.
No, that's very, very fair and totally spot on, right? We all have to accept some responsibility, right? And the role we play in the process. All right, so we're going to go to sort of the lightning round here, and really it's a simple question to all of you, which is, what is the one action, what is the one thing you think that we need to do? And this could be in the system, right? This could be as a professional, this could be as a homeowner. So I'll give you flexibility there, but what is the one thing that you think we need to do to create the change to move us in the right direction? And Greg, I'll start with you, and everyone will get a chance to do it.
Thank you. Educate. I think the more people know, like I said before, the better equipped they are to make decisions that are good for themselves, for their families, and for their communities. I think that, for example, just simply not going with a gas in your home or a gas meter, you save enough money perhaps to put in solar panels, and that can make a huge difference in your community and in your home and in your family. So I think that the better able we are to communicate to consumers and to other people in our industry, the better positioned we will all be to make a difference in sustainability and low carbon construction.
Thank you, Greg. Neil, what's your one thing?
Oh, Ben, I'm like scribbling down. How can you?
You've got like 8 things, but I'm making you pick just one.
There's so many. I think helping provide access to more people to have a roof over their head is a huge thing. And then how can we enable people to really establish a relationship with their place, even if that means how do we get more people's soil or hands in the soil so that they can really form that bond with what makes their unique space and place their own.
Very, very true. Very, very true. Let's see here. Who wants to go next? Avide, you want to go next? What's your one thing?
Sure. Hard to pick one. I think my biggest pain point going through this process now of retrofitting a home is that homeowners are oftentimes in the dark and they don't have any resources or guides, any non-biased let's say, resources or guides that tell them, here's what you should do for your house, for your situation. This is what would make sense. And, you know, somebody who's not trying to sell them anything, just offers them that advice. And I think that is something that I have been speaking with lenders as something that they could incorporate into part of their program, part of their lending strategy, is to have a consultant for the homeowner. That this could be something that cities could even provide. If the homeowner is trying to upgrade or renovate, hey, here's a consultant to get in touch with. This is covered, it's free. Just have them look at your house holistically. I think that's really needed. Otherwise, we're kind of stuck in this piecemeal approach of optimizing some systems and not others, and we're just not going to make much progress.
Thank you, Abide. And one of the things we've talked about doing in our Green Homes Committee, and Azumi's probably gonna get mad at me for talking about this too early, but you know, we want to have just, you know, an open help desk, you know, for start with, like, you know, an hour a month or an hour every couple of weeks, and make sure someone's there to help people with questions, and just start advertising that. So that's something that we're going to start trying to do here at USGBCLA, is something that's actionable, that, you know, even we just make the space and it's open to anyone to show up, we can help. I think that can at least start making an impact here on some level. Cynthia, what's your one thing?
I'll tell you my one thing, but I just wanted to respond to what Abide said. I know that within some of the federal programs that are coming through, there is a rebate for $200 for a home energy assessment. And I think, or I hope that institutions can embrace something like that to proliferate more energy information that's customizable for the home. My one thing would be to ask for it. Ask for the green, the sustainable, the efficient, and by that I hear from real estate agents, I hear from contractors, I hear from lenders. You know, people don't care about green, people don't care about sustainability, people don't care about efficiency. But I can cite you reports from NAR, from the Home Builders Association, from luxury real estate groups that say, no, actually they do care about it. They care a lot about it. The problem is they're not using the same language that we would use in the biz to talk about the things that they want, the benefits that they want, and be able to tie that back to green, sustainable, efficient, whatever. And so I feel like we in the industry need to have, you know, it's about education, and we need to have these conversations, not just within our workflow, but with our neighbors, with our family members, and get more people sort of asking for it, asking for a better quality life through living better, so that we can change the minds of some professionals who seem to think that, like, I don't need to pay attention to this until my customers are asking for it. Well, your customers want it now. Let's help them learn how to ask for it.
Thank you, Cynthia. Wow, these are some great closing statements. We need some quotes coming out of this. We need some quotes coming out of this. Steve, what's your one thing? You're on mute, Steve. You're on mute. Got you twice.
Sorry. We just need to consume a lot less.
Way to keep it simple. Yeah. Robin, close us out strong. What's your one thing?
Gosh, we should all be walking the walk, talking the talk, and look at our own homes and invite our friends over. And one of the things that I love, a quote, I think Maya Angelou or Oprah had this, that when you have a dinner party and you tell people, you walk them through your home and you show them things, they'll tell their friends. And we need to have a dinner party or two this year. Maybe show somebody a Solo Tube, because you can't really explain it unless you say, oh, I don't have any lights on in my house. This is all passive light. Or this countertop was reclaimed from a remnant. Those are things that we should be doing, and telling people the story so that they can see it, feel it, touch it, and understand what they can do in their homes.
There's another idea for our committee, is we're gonna have, you know, green home dinner party night. It'll just be like a national holiday. I think Neil could start working on that too with his network across the country. It could be a good idea. Well, we're not done yet. We're going to go to some breakouts here in just a second, so folks can ask their questions. and have a little bit more detailed conversation. One thing I want to share that we did, we created this last year. We white labeled a tool that a company in our accelerator had put together, a company called Yellow Tin. I'm just going to drop the link here in the chat, but I love this tool, and I won't kind of dive into it right now, but it lets you actually put in whether you own or rent, where you're at and how much you spend on your bill, and lets you figure out how to create basically a decarbonization report and pathway for your own home. And you can do it on a year, 3 years, 5 years, 10 years, and it shows you where you can both decarbonize and save energy or save water. So I just wanted to plug that really quick. It's free. It's available on our website, and anybody can use it. So we hope people do. I'd be remiss if I didn't plug our gala coming up here on December 8th. Our awards are open right now for people to submit projects, including green homes, for those of you out there who have them. We also have community awards, so please, you can scan that link to check out more on the event. I'm going to go to our breakouts. I'm going to launch these right now. So we're going to have 4 different breakouts: construction design, site landscaping and water, efficiency and electrification, and home value and incentives. So I'm going to launch these. Now you should be able to select your own room. So you're going to see something pop up, and if you're looking at your Zoom bar, there's something will pop up in red for breakouts, and you should be able to select a room. I'm going to assign our speakers to some various rooms here, and if you want to go in a specific room, you can drop it in the chat if you can't figure out how to find it yourself. But just keep in mind, with everyone throwing their rooms at me, it's going to take me a little while to assign you to that room. So again, you should hopefully see a little pop-up open up around the breakouts. Select the one that you want to go into. I'm going to start dropping our speakers into some of those rooms now. And then if you can't figure out how to do that, put it in the chat, and I will get to you eventually. It'll probably take me a couple minutes. We'll leave the breakout rooms open for about 15 minutes, and we'll bring everyone back here at 5:45. So with that, head off to your breakouts, and I'll start assigning people now. Welcome back, everyone. It's always like coming back from the Matrix when we come back from the breakouts. Hopefully you enjoyed your conversations in the rooms. Let me see if there's any. Is everyone back here yet? Looks like everyone's back. Oh no, 2 seconds. 2 seconds. There we go. All right, now welcome back, everyone. And I won't make my Matrix joke again. I won't do that again. I want to say thank you to all of our speakers today. Thank you to Lloyd for helping to frame the conversation for us. Thank you to all of our panelists for making the time to share with us today. I thought it was really great dialogue, and I hope you learned something from each other as well, and we'll follow up with each other in the future. I also want to remind you again that we have a gala coming up on December 8th. We hope you can join us. We think we throw a good party for a good cause, and we hope to see you there. And if you feel inspired again by any of the work that we're doing, you can donate by texting GREEN to 707070. It really means a lot here for our small nonprofit team. And I also want to say thank you to all of our annual sponsors. They really make all of our work happen on a day-to-day basis, and we couldn't do what we do without them. So with that, thank you again. Please think about how to bring green homes into your life and take responsibility for what you can control, and take the time to communicate and educate each other. And we'll work on putting some programmatic elements in place here in the LA region to help support this movement going forward. With that, enjoy the rest of your evening, and hopefully we'll see you again soon.
Great. Thank you, Ben. Thanks so much.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank you,
you.
everyone.